we think about some of the things like a simple bank reconciliation and an incredibly mundane and tedious process to make sure that the transactions tie out between their core ERP and their bank, which if you're on a legacy ERP system, that might not be as easy. And there might be some steps that come in between that require members of the team to do that at the start of the week or at the end of the week, when again, it takes them away from their core responsibilities of being strategic partners to the business and being able to go and analyze things that are worthy of their time and allow them to be able to create better direction for how the finance org is going to support the business more broadly.
Welcome everybody to another episode of AI Got This. And today we are going to be talking AI with our friend Chuck from Workday, who's the CTO of Workday. Am I saying that right?
No, neither. I'm our industry advisor for all of our tech and media companies, and they, of course, are very invested in AI and ML, so it's been a steep learning curve the last 5 years just keeping up.
Okay, even better title, so that's fantastic. And Todd from Armanino. Todd, why don't you introduce yourself really quick?
Yeah, excited to be here, everyone. I'm a senior consultant on our strategy and transformation team, and I've been working with a lot of companies today, figure out where AI fits into their business. So thanks for having me, Carmel.
Yeah, absolutely. Chuck, do you want to do a formal introduction since I didn't let you actually do a full one?
Absolutely. Let me start from the beginning. I was born in Palo Alto. No, I'm kidding.
I love that. When I was 5.
I'm our industry advisor for tech and media companies at Workday. I think I have the best job at Workday. It means I get to work with our sales team. I get to work with our current base and figure out where they want to go, whether it's, current state functionality, where our roadmap needs to go. Obviously, AI and ML is a huge part of that. And prior to that, I'm still a licensed CPA, started off at Deloitte, went through the IPO process twice, once at a company called Pandora Music that I hope a lot of you have heard of, and then another company in the Bay Area called Apogee. But now I'm in Boston, or an hour south, and I'm an East Coaster now.
Welcome to the East Coast. I'm in upstate New York, so I feel you. All right, well, let's just sort of dive in, right? So we're talking about AI and how we sort of see AI playing in, we've done this is our second episode that's sort of talking about ERP and AI and how we see it. And there have been some studies that have talked a little bit about how folks, I read a white paper a couple of weeks ago where somebody thought that AI was going to stay on the peripheral of ERP systems. And I sort of see that differently, but I'd like to get your guys' perspective on how do you see AI playing in the ERP space? And maybe we focus today specifically on like Workday. How's Workday? What is their sort of position about AI and how that's going to evolve around the Workday platform?
Yeah. So where to begin? And I think, with Workday's journey, you'd have to go back 8 years where ML and AI have been ingrained in that platform, meaning it's not something that we bought. It's not an external tool that we're trying to develop on. It's within our own data models, which is obviously very key for privacy, security, making sure you don't have hallucinations and errors and all of that stuff. And we've been privileged to work with over 3,000 of our customers that have opted into our ML and AI to say, hey, can we use your data to test those models? What that's now allowed us to do is already create functionality. And again, this is me, the accountant, talking and solve a lot of the high transactional volume cases. So, you think about accounts payable and you've got OCR scanning. Well, templates don't work because all of your vendors have different templates and different formats for invoices.
Yeah.
How do we use AI to automatically use that historical data and say, you know what, I'm going to process that AP, with no touch. Same thing with cash matching, right? You think of a customer that gives you a lockbox deposit, no information. That was my past life for many years. But using historical data to be able to automatically match or at least make a suggestion. I look at those, couple features that I've talked about is, okay, those are great. I think those are, a nice teaser into where Workday is going, right? And the only way I think Workday can be successful is to have that historical data and customers that are allowing us to use that data to build better models. Now we're getting into some really cool stuff. I wish I could think of a better term for it, of in addition to automating transactions, can we look at a PDF as an example? Maybe it's from a vendor, from a customer contract. can we scan that? Can we flag anomalies there, or flag, my previous life, I spent a lot of time, dealing with revenue recognition. Are there things in the contracts like material rights or performance obligations we can catch and now bring those things into the Workday platform? That's where I'm getting really excited. And I'll give you another example. We have something today called Journal Entry Insights. Again, we use historical data. We're looking for, hey, that amount doesn't look quite right based on, historical patterns for this journal entry. Maybe it's an accrual, right? Or we hit the wrong department. We'll actually suggest, hey, maybe you want to make a reclass, or maybe you don't want to approve this journal entry. Again, I think that's a really cool teaser of the things to come, which are going to be now. We can look at a single journal entry. Why couldn't we look at all of your financial statements and start to make, a real fluctuation analysis, which every accountant, lives and breathes when they're doing a quarter end or they're filing 10Ks or 10Qs, right? So I don't know, that was a long-winded answer, Carmel, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of direction of where we've been and where we're going.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I mean, I think where you started with the, you have to go back 8 years ago that you were already thinking about this is brilliantly smart, right? Because there are a lot of people that have legacy ERP systems that are basically catching up at this point. How do we retrofit what we've had for 30 years? Because while it was important 30 years ago, it was a totally different beast, right? It wasn't accessible to everyone, and really large scale organizations were the only ones that were sort of using AI, and we didn't really think about it in the ERP system itself. We thought about it as sort of ancillary things that moved around there. Watson on Jeopardy. I don't know if you remember that. I might be aging myself here, but yeah, no, I think that's a great place to start. Todd, what do you see when you're working with clients or prospects today? What are they looking for from an AI perspective that as they start navigating this world, how are they thinking about it?
Yeah, and Chuck, great point in starting about where things have come from and where they are today. I think what we lose sight of with AI and how it fits into the business is all the things that came before it. So AI isn't as great without something like optical character recognition in their core business process, something like ingesting an invoice from a vendor and being able to upload all the information from that invoice into their journals. And that's one of those examples, Carmel, about how customers are starting to use tools like Workday to support that automation in their businesses. But it takes a step further when we think about some of the things like a simple bank reconciliation and an incredibly mundane and tedious process to make sure that the transactions tie out between their core ERP and their bank, which if you're on a legacy ERP system, that might not be as easy. And there might be some steps that come in between that require members of the team to do that at the start of the week or at the end of the week, when again, it takes them away from their core responsibilities of being strategic partners to the business and being able to go and analyze things that are worthy of their time and allow them to be able to create better direction for how the finance org is going to support the business more broadly. So I think if you start there on the finance side, you're already taking care of a lot of really great things that they're looking at today. But let's not look at it just from finance. There's lots of things related to the talent acquisition process that some of these finance orgs also need today. They want to have analysts who know how to use AI as a skill set to be able to go and accelerate some of the things they're doing at the junior level of the finance process, not just how's our 10K look before we go and report. So it's going to span a wide range of things that happen across the business. And finance is a great place to start, especially when it relates to the ERP and all the things that Chuck talked about in the process too.
Yeah, awesome. I was actually at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking about bank reconciliations being one of the things that we could automate. And I said, nobody comes to work in the morning and says, I love doing bank recs. And this lady raises her hand and said, I love doing bank recs. And I was like, get out of here. No, you don't. It's pretty funny though. Okay, great. I think that's a start, right? And if we think about the finance organization too, I think one of the things that people are starting to think about and talk about is, how do we think about generative AI as part of the process, right? And I think we're starting to see a few things happen with generative AI. One, everybody's talking about small language models now, right? So large language models, ChatGPT, public, maybe you've got large language models when you think about Copilot, right? That Microsoft just announced. But we're also starting to see small language models where we can take subsets of data and interact with the same technology from a generative AI perspective. Are you guys seeing any of that from a Workday perspective that you know about, Chuck? Like, is generative AI sort of part of the ecosystem or future?
Absolutely. And in fact, I'm trying to think back when we released these features, but I'll give you a couple good examples. So you think about like a job requisition or a hiring rec, right? Somebody in recruiting has to, in previous state, they have to go find out, okay, the skills necessary, and they're literally typing out what that job requisition should look like. As part of generative AI, Workday is now looking at, again, skills for that job requisition and looking at historical skills, looking at historical recs, and now generating essentially a first pass at what that job rec should look like. What I love about the Workday interface with that, though, is it doesn't just automatically populate that job requisition, right? It's telling you from a user experience why it thinks that this type of language makes sense. It's allowing you to interface and pick and choose. Do you want to use this language or even change the tone? We're also taking that with, dunning and collections, which most people really don't want to do collections, right? All the nasty grams, hey, you're past due. No, you're really past due. We're pulling, your service away from you. Workday is, again, because we have the historical data from that customer, we know their payment timing. We can easily produce a customer statement. Why can't we also get into that dunning template, that nasty gram, so to speak, and change the template based off of those historical experiences? And what I really like about that, right, is once, and we're already seeing a lot of adoption with this, customers comfortable with those suggestions that Workday is doing, then we're now layering that into our workflows to say, okay, that those templates are now going to automatically go to your customers. Of course, you can jump in and you can continue to interact with the system, but just automating those things that historically people thought couldn't be done in the past is really where we're going.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that you're looking at that from a collections perspective, and how do you look at the past behavior? I mean, I think everybody has those clients in their portfolio that are always 90 days late, but they always pay. They're just always 90 days late, right? So sending them to collections is probably not the best approach there, but I think that's brilliant.
They're always in media or advertising too. They're always. Just,
that's funny.
Pro tip for anybody in that industry, you already know this, but those are the ones you want to go after.
Brilliant. Okay. And so when I think I mentioned to you guys right before we started this call, right? I was just on a call with a couple of organizations that were talking about using generative instead of standard reporting. And in my opinion, I don't think we're there yet, but I'd love to hear your guys' opinion about how, one, Workday's thinking about it, but also two, Todd, maybe like, are you hearing that from your clients? Like, people are actually thinking about, we don't need the standard reporting or finance packages that we traditionally have seen. We're going to do it all through generative AI. And by the way, this was the first time I've ever heard this, so I was a little bit like, I don't think we're ready for that, but love your opinion.
Well, as we know, Carmel, there's a spectrum of where people fall on the use of generative AI in their business, sort of that life cycle adopter type of approach of you are an early adopter, you might be a laggard where you're not quite ready to do full generative AI for your earnings report or quarterly report, but certainly being able to summarize the performance of a business relative to a budget, for example, right? We know how specific it is to high growth technology companies like the ones you support, Chuck, about showing profitability and showing growth in a profitable way. And so how can we go into that review with our venture capitalists at the quarterly report and say, hey, here's our performance relative to the budget that we set out for this quarter and the way that we're using those funds that you provided us, using generative AI to look across that of adaptive planning, for example, and view those prompts to go into that meeting and have an intelligent conversation where that might take, your director of FP&A some time to turn around, your controller to go and validate some of those assumptions or those performance modules that you've had. So I think that is certainly a next step. You think about how much time goes into preparing for a quarterly earnings call for any publicly traded company, and what I'll call the preamble that starts out at the beginning. What are some of the high level areas that we're looking at relative to how we performed, something like versus profits and so on. So I think you'll definitely start to see generative AI come into play there more in terms of performance reporting. As it comes to maybe replacing an entire stack of IT or architecture, I still think we're a little ways away from that, but I'm excited to see how different CFOs and different partners to the business start to incorporate it for that performance reporting.
Yeah, very cool. What about you, Chuck? What are you seeing in the marketplace?
Yeah, Todd, I think you're spot on. It's almost like people are starting to either dip a toe in ML and AI, or they're jumping in and they don't know how deep the water is, so to speak. And I've talked to a few different CAOs, and they've said, well, I don't understand why I can't just automatically have my financials done, flux analysis done, MD&As done, and why is this so hard? And a lot of it goes back to, for an ERP to do this right, I already talked about needing the historical data, but the amount of security and accuracy needed to really make AI and ML effective still is going to take some time, right? We're not at the Terminator Skynet level yet, where you click a button and you have financials. But I do see very soon, at least for Workday, going back to Todd's point, that ability to assist with a fluctuation analysis. Maybe that's looking at percentage change thresholds and being able to analyze, okay, why are we up or down? Was it something related to R&D or sales and marketing, right? And give better insights. And even seen, and again, safe harbor, making no promises, but I've seen within Workday even starting to think about the ability to write your MD&A or your disclosures. So again, if we have your financials, we have your generative capabilities for AI, why couldn't we take that next step? I think we're going to start to see that as sort of the breaking of the ice, so to speak, on financial management.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's super interesting. And you guys both sort of mentioned the clean data piece of that. And I think I always have a saying that you have clean data 2 times in your life cycle. The day you install it and the day you replace it, right? Because anytime somebody adds a new ERP or you replace your ERP, you got to clean that data up. And so I think, data management, and, we've been talking about big data for 25, 30 years, and how that really is going to play a part in AI and analytics and predictive analytics. And I think we're starting to see it come to fruition now, right? Because you can utilize AI, generative AI, machine learning, predictive analytics, but if the data behind there is wrong or inconsistent or is just bad data, that's what you're going to get from your predictive analytics and AI. And so I think, are you guys seeing too that people are starting to talk about, hey, what should my data strategy be when it comes to thinking about AI? And I think it's more on the generative and predictive analytics side of it, but it'd be interesting to get your guys' take on our organizations sort of in the medium to, not Fortune 500, but below that, starting to think about big data and how we start talking about that and to really utilize that. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, it's the age-old adage of data in, good data out, as we've always said in relation to some of those initiatives around big data that have happened over the years. I think it's an endless battle to make sure data stays clean in an organization. And I love your sentiment around there's 2 times when you have clean data in your life, which is before the end of an ERP, at the start of a new one. I'd say more broadly, if I may, is this topic of NVIDIA in the marketplace, right? I think why AI is on the minds of everybody is this idea that NVIDIA is just experiencing atmospheric growth to power that next generation of AI. And so every leader out there is being told every day from these companies that AI is the future and it's part of your business and it's going to be here to stay. Yeah. So how do we take that first bite? How do we actually dip our toe into the water? And while I think many companies want to just start holistically using AI across their business, it does come with another reflection of where are we with our data strategy? What sort of data warehousing technology are we using? Is it clean? Because if we start feeding it into these models, what outputs are we really going to get? And again, this is an ongoing battle that any CIO or CTO is facing today about making sure our data stays clean, we have the right tools to create clean data, and that we can effectively move that data around the organization as well. And Chuck, I know you see that in the way you build the models at Workday as well.
Yeah, and Todd, I think you hit the nail on the head. First, obviously, with garbage in, garbage out. And I think where Workday is uniquely positioned is we are a true platform, meaning you have your employee data, you have obviously ERP, financials, that also can extend itself to procurement, projects, expenses, right? Everything that we have to offer. And I say that's key when you think about data management, because for us anyway, and a lot of companies I talk to, they might, be on a different ERP and they've got a pretty significant tech stack, which bottlenecks a lot of the abilities they can do with ML and AI, right? Let's say you're using an expense reporting tool. It's, and they can develop ML or AI on top of their platform, but it's only going to be with that subset of data. It's not going to have a relationship to anything else in the business. So then we've been talking a little bit about financial fluctuations and, doing like 10K, 10Q financial reporting. Very difficult to get insights when you've got data coming from different sources. It's still at Workday, though, even though we manage a lot of the data and the processes on the HR and the finance side, we still have to take that very seriously, especially when we like to integrate large data to the Workday platform, whether it's like a high volume B2B or B2C company. It will sit in the Workday platform after it's integrated, but we have to make sure that that data is also clean and not corrupt and not going to spike our models. So those are some of the things we're internally thinking about. We know our customers are as well. And a lot of times we find ourselves having to solution sort of around, a large tech stack. So it's not an easy problem to solve.
Yeah, and when you're thinking about that in the models that you guys are training today, and we talk about zero trust and how that needs to work, is there some sort of, like, when you guys are doing these models, and let's say I'm a customer I opt in for the AI part of this, and we're using that, how do I ensure that I'm not a contributor to bad data into those models, right? So one of the things that I talk to folks about on a regular basis is, we've been talking about data governance forever. Also, that's nice that you have a data governance policy or practice, but what are you doing from a custodianship perspective to ensure that it actually stays clean, right? You can have the policy, but if nobody's actually watching the store, how do we know that the data is still clean? So, like, is there an approach that you're talking to your clients about around that?
Yeah, at least for Workday, and there's probably a lot to unpack with this, is we're a closed loop in terms of the data we'll even allow into Workday to have any type of influence for ML and AI. And a lot of the testing of the data we're doing is obviously not in a customer's instance of Workday. It's feeding into different models that we are completely segregating and testing outside. And Cyan, who is our CTO, is an example of how seriously we take this at Workday. He is on the President's Council for ML and AI. It goes right up to Joe Biden. And all of that to say, the way that we treat the data and the way Workday ethically builds its products is, I think, really second to none, just based on that level of security. It goes back to that point I was making, about the CAO that was sort of, busting my chops of why aren't we further along? It goes back to that level of security. We will not develop anything unless we're 100% confident that it will be effective and will not, hurt anybody else's data. And the last thing I'll say too is that when we're making suggestions or within our models, the interface is very focused on telling you what it's doing and really creating more rules, as opposed to going in and augmenting the data, which HR and accounting people will absolutely not stand for. So I hate to say it, but it's sort of, you can choose to use a lot of the functionality. You can bypass it. We obviously want you to adopt it, because the more you are, the better those models are going to get.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Interesting. Also, this is the first time on my podcast that the president's name has been used. So good job, Chuck.
No, not political, just
no,
yeah.
It's just awesome. I wasn't expecting that, but very cool. Todd, are you seeing our customers sort of think about data custodianship and what they have to do with that as they're looking at AI in their organizations? Like, Are they
Yeah.
taking it seriously at this point? I feel like that's sort of the question, right? Like,
Yeah. And you'd be amazed about how many companies we engage or that I've engaged with in my career who think they're really adept at data management and clean data strategies. I'd always come up with this thesis of, there's 3 steps to being really good at data and data analytics in general, which is being able to have clean data to report on, being able to actually go and report on that data. So the visualization, how are we representing that data? And the third component, which is the most difficult, which is where I think AI starts to come in more, which is how do you take action on that data from those reports? It's great that we have it. It's great that we're seeing all this rich information across our business, but now actually how am I going to use that and execute on something that we've learned? And that's where AI starts to come in more. And I think that's where, in terms of, if I go back to a user experience type of engagement with these tools, I think Workday is being extremely thoughtful in the way they're rolling out AI across the platform, where it's not intrusive, it's not overwhelming, it's not truly taking over the role of the end user. It is augmenting, it is surfacing in a gentle way how it's going to actually support the business today. And that might change over time. And I think, again, that comes on the appetite scale of how receptive you are to AI in your business today. But with platforms like Workday, to Chuck's point, being closed ecosystem, the data is rich, it's tightly controlled, and it can be reported on effectively that way. In some of the engagements that we've been leading so far, Carmen, data strategy is always a component of that. We definitely have requests to use AI through robotic process automation or bot workers for these companies. But really, there's a recommendation that we need to make before we get to that point of deploying those robotic process workers, where it's, let's make sure that the data that's getting fed into it, something as simple as login credentials, is accurate and is allowing that bot to go and do its process effectively. I think the same concept applies to AI, is that it's going to force everyone to take that step back again of where is our data strategy today. And that happened, let's call it, the early teens, 2013 to 2015, of big data and big analytics coming into play, and all the tools that flooded the market back then around data visualization, right? Mm-hmm. That same thing is coming to play now with a whole flood of tools out there for AI to simplify something as long as a legal brief into a really simple AI output of what's the most important thing about this document that I need to understand, and making sure those processes don't hallucinate the output of that information as well. So yes, it's going to be just another reflection of where are we in our data strategy, and are we doing a great job of keeping our data clean?
Okay, good. Okay, one last question for us. If you got to say what was going to come next from AI inside of either your ecosystem or in general, what would you want to see coming out of this? Right, like you get to invent whatever you want. What is the AI thing that you guys are like, man, I really got to have this? Like, what would you want it to be?
Yeah, I can kick that one off, and I'm not going to make up something, pie in the sky. I talked a little bit about taking documents, and again, this can certainly apply to HR and accounting or finance teams, external documents, scanning those, understanding the language of the documents, because I think that's where a lot of the manual processes come from, right? Mm-hmm. I think a lot of systems will catch up to being able to automate things like AR, AP, kind of the rudimentary stuff.
Sure.
But that ability to look at an external document, and again, I'll pick on customer contracts as an example, look at what could be risky, and then have a relationship of those terms in the documents for billing, for revenue recognition, for approvals, right? And really now give another layer of review and automation for those types of things. I think if we can, at least on the Workday strategy, execute on that very quickly, I think that's going to be a showstopper.
Yeah, I love that. What about you, Todd?
Yeah, I have a slightly different perspective in that I haven't done my expenses yet this month, and they're going to be long. And is there a way that we can leverage something like optical character recognition, upload all the inputs into the expense fields, but not just stop there, actually tie out the total amount outstanding for my expenses relative to all the ones that the bot or the AI has recognized within my receipts? And me, the human, going in and making sure those things tie out, almost like a bank reconciliation a little bit, but with my credit card, my expenses, and the way I submit them to the business as well. So I would love for that to get better automated in terms of all the people out there who have to do expenses every month or every quarter, I think that could save us all a lot of time. So that's what I'm hoping Workday comes out with next, Chuck.
Well, you've got a phone that tracks you everywhere. We certainly can scan receipts today. I don't think that's far-fetched, Todd. Watch out.
Yeah, I don't think it is either.
We have the pillars.
Yeah,
the pillars are there.
for sure. I want one that can manage my calendar. So I literally just had a call today where they're like, oh, we booked you for this speaking engagement. And I went, well, I'm already in a different state that day, having a different speaking engagement. So that's mine. Something that could manage my calendar would be amazing. All right. Any final words from you guys that you want to share with the audience? Or maybe just say goodbye. Either way.
I'll start. I'll just say it's really not a matter of if people start to adopt AI. It's truly when. And I think it's just a matter of where do we start and what's palatable, what seems easy for us to take down. It is not really this all or nothing approach to how we use these tools. It's just a matter of finding the right spot to start with, recognizing the value, and then moving on from there to that next thing that we want to use AI, generative AI, or robotic process automation to support. So, Armanino is a great voice for that. Transformative platforms like Workday are a great voice for that too. And so we hope we get to play a role in that for companies out there today.
Awesome. Yeah. Chuck?
Yeah, as a former skeptic, former auditor, the last, I'd say 2 to 3 years, I've really embraced it. Now I get to I have, again, a great job. I get to talk to our product team, see what's coming out next, what's under the covers. And, that fear that I have, that many might have of, oh, is my job going to go away? Or, I am that person that's sort of gluing everything together with automation tasks and the person being the automation task. I think it's going to up-level people and turn a lot of transactional focus into reviewing. And I think it's going to really make an impact. And I'm hoping that within the next year or two, people are really going to start to embrace it, like I think everybody on this call is.
Yeah, certainly agree with both of you. And I think, we are seeing that. And if you look at the rate of change just in the AI landscape alone, I can tell you that, I started speaking publicly at different events about a year ago, right after, the big hype of ChatGPT happened. And the decks I have from those presentations to the ones I do today are drastically different, right? So the rate of change is happening on a regular basis. I agree that it's here to stay. It's kind of like, we're in the adoption phase. If we think about when the internet was launched, we're, same type of thing. And so we're in that adoption stage. I think it's just moving a little faster than it did back in the 80s when the internet was invented. But listen, I really appreciate you both being here. Thank you so much. Super insightful. And next time on AI Got This, we'll be talking healthcare and AI. So stay tuned.